Recall as you work through this tutorial that workflows are known as processes in K2 and process instances are a single occurrence of a process. The tools in K2 Workspace most commonly used for administering and managing processes are the Process Rights page, which is used for assigning permissions to a process, the Versions page, which allows the administrator to change the default workflow version used in a process overall, and the Instances page, which gives the administrator the ability to stop, start, and remove process instances in the environment. In this tutorial, we will explore all three tools and observe the results after we have made changes. With step 1, we will start new instances of the Workflow Administration sample process, which will be used in future sections of this tutorial. A quick note before we begin: if you do not know where to access K2 Workspace, ask your K2 administrator for the URL to your K2 Workspace site. Otherwise, you can launch K2 Workspace if you don't have it open already. Then drill down into the Workflow Administration sample process as I show you here, and select the Instances option. The Instances screen should open in the pane to the right on your page. Notice I don't have any running instances appearing on this pane as of yet. This is telling us that this process, Workflow Administration Sample, does not have any active processes at this point in time. When you see it this way, it could be a newly deployed process or simply mean that process instances for this workflow have all been completed or have been removed. From this point in the tutorial, we do need to add a few more instances to move forward. So you can click the Start New button found in the menu bar at the top of this section. Then on the Create New Process Instance screen, briefly take notice of the Folio field. The folio is a unique identifier that allows the administrator and users to that degree to differentiate one process instance from another. By default in this dialog, K2 will assign the date to the folio field when starting process instances from K2 Workspace. In this tutorial, we are going to enter our own folio properties, which will allow us to pick and choose different process instances later on in our other tutorial steps. Let's open up the folio text box for editing. We can do this by unchecking the Use Date checkbox. Then in the folio field for this process instance, let's enter in Task Redirect. We can leave Start Async checked and click the Start button. Now we have one active Workflow Administration sample process instance available to us. Check out the folio value for this process. You'll see Task Redirect for that field, which is what we just entered. The running status over here in the status field indicates that K2 is actively processing this workflow. If you go and refresh the list, you should see the status change to active, which means that the workflow is active and waiting for input, in this case for a user to complete a task. To prepare for the future steps in this tutorial, we do need to create several more process instances with K2 Workspace. Using the same steps we just implemented to start the Task Redirect process instance, let's run through and start new process instances using the following entries for each folio property. These entries will be GoToActivity, Start/Stop, Deleted, Normal Execution 1, and Normal Execution 2. To save some time, I'm going to step away and start each of these process instances on my own. Feel free to pause the video here, then we will circle back to review this step. As I mentioned earlier, when first started, process instances show a running status value, which then updates to active. When you see the active status kick in, the process instance is now waiting for the next workflow step to take place. The Instances screen here also shows us who started the workflow as the Workflow Originator column, and also when the workflow was started. Your screen should look like mine as shown here before completing the next steps of this tutorial. In review, we started a number of process instances from the Workflow Administration sample process. We set the folio property for our process instances using manually entered values. The folio is not a required value, and there are some instances where you will not assign any value, most likely when automated system tasks fire and you're not as concerned with folio values from an administration standpoint. But having the folio field filled in does help make each process instance unique from other process instances in your environment. For step 2, we will use the Instances Management page to stop, start, and remove a process instance. Reasons for doing this are multiple in nature. For example, if you know a process will need to access an external system that will be offline for a period, you can suspend the running processes to avoid workflow errors. In the Instances Management pane in K2 Workspace, under the Workflow Administration Sample Workflow, put a check in the box to the left of the process instance named Start Stop in the folio to select it. Now click the Stop button found in the menu at the top of this section on the page. Notice the status value after you've stopped the instance. Select the Start Stop process instance once again, and then start it from the menu. Notice the status value changes back to active again. Having seen how to stop and start a process again, let's go on and look at how to remove a process instance, which will actually permanently delete it from K2. And again, I'll iterate, about deleting a process, you cannot retrieve a deleted process instance if you have removed it from the system, hence the permanence of it. To demonstrate this, let's go back and open the Process Overview report and observe the process instance named deleted. Remember, if you reviewed the Standard Reports tutorial, the Process Overview report contains current as well as historical data for process instances. Let's click the Home icon in K2 Workspace up here on the upper left to return to where we can find the reports. From the landing page, let's open the Process Overview report link found in the Reports pane over here on the left. This may take a few moments for the report to open depending on your environment and when you last hit it. When the Process Overview report opens, you will first see a list of all processes that have been deployed to the environment, along with the number of process instances that have been started for each of these processes. Notice the Workflow Administration Sample process indicates the 6 instances we just started in the previous step. Click on the Workflow Administration Sample process here to drill down into its Process Instances report. On the Process Instances screen, you will see a list of all the instances for this process. This list will include processes that are currently active, as well as processes that have historically completed. If you're following along in your own environment, confirm that the deleted process instance is shown and is currently active. That looks good here. Let's return to the Management Console and remove the process called deleted from the Instances Management screen. Once we delete it, we will come back to the Process Overview report and confirm the instance is no longer shown. Here's an example of why you may want to remove a process instance. Say you have a user that has submitted a workflow and the workflow is currently awaiting approval from a destination user. The originator decides at some point that they want to cancel the workflow. You can accomplish this by removing the process instance within K2 Workspace. This is also another example of how the folio might be very helpful in locating the correct process instance that you want to remove. Hover over the Management menu option at the top of the page, then open the Management Console, and navigate to the Workflow Administration Sample process. Go down and open the K2 Server Tree option. Go to Workflow Server, Processes, K2 Learning Workflow Administration, and open up Workflow Administration Sample. Go into the Instances pane and put a check in the box to select the deleted process instance and click Remove. You should see a confirmation pop up. In the confirmation window, check the box to also remove log entries. Then you can click OK. Removing the log entries completely deletes the process instance from K2 and any records related to it. You will no longer see any of this information even in the standard K2 reports. The deleted process instance should no longer be shown on the instances screen now. To confirm the process instance has been completely removed from K2, let's return to the Process Overview report. And remember, this report shows all process instances whether they are active or not. Select the Home icon on the upper left of K2 Workspace to return to the landing page. Then select the Process Overview report in the Reports pane. Confirm that the instance total for the Workflow Administration sample is now 5 instead of 6. Select the Workflow Administration sample process to drill down into the process instances for it. Here we can see that the process named deleted is no longer here. Going back to review, in this step we stopped or suspended the process name start stop. Stopping a process instance does not remove it, it merely puts it on hold until the instance is either started or removed. If there are any tasks that have been fired off when the instance was stopped, they will immediately fire off again when the instance is started. To permanently delete a process instance from K2, choose the Remove option, making sure to select the Remove Logs option as well. Once you remove a process instance and its logs, there is no way to retrieve it. In step 3, we will force a workflow to go to another activity by using the Go To Activity option in the Instances page. Suppose a user has submitted a workflow. They contact you at some point to say they need to make a change to their form entry and want to know if there is any possibility of retrieving the form or workflow. This can be accomplished by using the Go To Activity option in K2 Workspace. The Go To Activity allows you to send the process instance to any of the steps within the workflow. Within the Instances page of the workflow called Workflow Administration Sample, check the box for the active process called Go To Activity to select it. Click on the Go To Activity button at the top of the page, and then select the step called Activity that will error. Click OK, and then click OK again when you see the confirmation message. Refresh the Instances screen by clicking the green double arrow icon located on the upper far right of the navigation bar. If you do use your refresh button on your browser, you will be redirected back to the K2 Workspace landing page. If that happens, simply navigate back to the Instances screen for this workflow. Notice the status is now showing error. We purposely sent this process to a step that would throw an error so that you could see how to repair a failed workflow. We will actually discuss workflow processes in an error state here in a few seconds. The point we want to make here is that you can direct a process to any step within a workflow using the Go To Activity option. We can send a process to a user task, a server-based activity, or strategically back to the first activity in the workflow, which essentially starts the workflow over again. Let's move on and talk about the error state of this process now. The Instances screen here is one area in K2 Workspace that indicates if a process instance is in an error state. You can also view process instances that are in an error state by accessing the Error Profiles option located under the Workflow Server node. In the left column, still under the Workflow Server node, click the Error Profiles option, then select All. If you can't see that, it may be easier to collapse the Processes node first. On this screen, you can view all of the process instances for all deployed processes that are in an error state. Notice that this screen will also give you a full view of the error text to work from as you begin to troubleshoot. In a quick review, in this step we use the Go To Activity option to redirect a process instance to a different step in the workflow. You will find this tool very useful for sending workflows back to originators or any other user that needs to make a change or addition to their form input. We purposely sent this process instance to a step that would throw an error to demonstrate how the status column updates with a red error marker. The Instances screen is one area in K2 Workspace that does indicate if a process instance is in an error state. You can also view all process instances that are in an error state by accessing the Error Profile screen. Here you will also find a brief description of the error to help you as you troubleshoot the issue. The last step in this section for managing process instances, being step 4, will show us how to repair a workflow based on the process we put in an error state back in step 3. For this step, we have specifically coded the workflow activity to repair itself the second time it is run. A real-world example where a workflow could go into an error state might be if a task was assigned to a new employee who did not have an email account set up yet. The error might read something like destination user not found. This, of course, would depend on how you pull in the destination user value and email address for that person's account. In this case, you could confirm the email account is now set up, then retry the step. K2 would see the user email account and move the workflow along. While still on the Error Profile screen, we will now retry the instance to see if we can repair it. Put a check in the box to the left of the Workflow Administration Sample process called Go To Activity, then click the Retry button up here at the top of the page. We want to confirm the process has completed now. We can do that by returning to the Process Overview report and looking at the process instance details for this workflow. Click on the Home button in the upper left of this page to return to the K2 Workspace landing page. Then select the Process Overview report link found in the Reports pane. Go to the Workflow Administration sample process to access the process instance details. And here we can confirm that the GoToActivity process instance has completed. Let's do one more final review. In this step, we repaired a process instance that was in an error state by using the retry option found in the Error Profiles pane. You can also define additional error profiles to filter errors based on the workflow or the error type. Retrying the error will execute the same event where the error occurred, but use caution when retrying events as you may have unexpected and possibly duplicate results based on what the event was designed to do. That's it for this tutorial section. Feel free to continue on to the next section called Managing Work Lists when you're ready.